Get started with the work session. Thank you all for being here today. In fact, all of the items tonight were placed on here by Mayor Wilson. And so, Mayor Wilson, if you want to jump right into the budget final summary, and
Sure.
you can go in any order of that you would like. I guess you're going to probably start off with the sales tax ordinance.
Yeah, and we can do that, but I was just going to look at this and show you how it's changed. When Jill looked at all of the funds, and I think I've shared this with some of you, the prepayment or the funds set aside from sales tax for the prepayment of city debt was fully funded to pay off all the city debt by June 1st of this year. So we took out what I had in there before to pay it off in 2 years because it was fully funded. So you'll see that on page 2. On this second page, this is how it affected the front page. We have, before we had half of the sales tax, 25% going to capital projects and 25% going to city debt payment. So now we're really only going to need like 12% for capital projects.
When you say, Mayor, let me interrupt
Yep.
you. When you say it's fully funded,
Yes.
what do you mean by it? It's
On June
fully
1st,
funded?
it's going to, all the city debt will be paid in full. We don't have to set aside additional funds for prepayment of debt.
She's talking about the, I don't know if these microphones are working or not. She's talking about the prepayment cash account is
Yeah.
already, has enough in it
To pay off all the debt?
Right,
in
to
city?
pay the city, yes.
All of it, it's in the general fund,
The general fund, yes.
which is how much?
It's that,
Is that 460,000?
No, that was
I was going to
removed.
say, that was budgeted.
no, it was the,
I removed that because we don't need to set aside anymore, which reduced the utility transfers.
I just would,
It
I'm just trying to
was-
get a number on
Yeah.
that.
It
Oh, the
was-
1661? Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. That's in the fund.
well, that's the regular.
Regular payment?
Payments, that's the regular payments.
Okay, and then the fund is how much?
The account balance, 2.190.
We were going to just pay it off in 2020, but since the funds are there, we only pay it once a year.
How much
So,
did you say, Jill?
2.190.
And that would be on June 1st?
yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm sorry.
Okay, and then the other amount that's highlighted is the 510,000 in transfers, so that lowered, but other things lowered this, but the utility transfers equal 510,000, what's going to be needed from utilities. What I did is I'm breaking out now, just so we can show how the money's being spent from the profits of utilities. All the transfers before that came from utilities was for operating. So now that I want to split this up, utility transfers for city operating is 510,000. Anything else that I want to put it on another line, that's utility transfers for economic and community development. That's where the amount is to pay for the K1.
So if you guys will look over on page 24,
And we might not need it, but it's still in the budget.
on the capital projects fund, this is where we kind of had to tie some loose ends together. Since we had to put in the 2.5 million for the K1 Center, Mayor went back and cut 3 of the items listed above that, the 164.5, the 400,000, and the 750,000.
Which we'll do in 2020.
And
and
then,
Unless we don't need it, right?
Well, realistically, we have a lot going on at the marina, and we were including the dredging. I mean, it probably wouldn't happen until the end of the fiscal year anyway and not be paid out. So timing-wise, it's probably going to be a 2020 anyway.
Okay, I just want to say that, if you really want to do that, well, there's a couple of things. If it's budgeted, then, do we, and it's maybe a hypothetical question, do we want to change the budget? Or
We did.
What is but it says an approved budget as if we're going to spend that, though.
That's
So
what,
does the
this
council
is
need
how
to-
we, this is the budget, like I said, we had to change it anyway because all the city debt's going to be paid for, which lowered the amount of transfers. So the amount, let me find that real quick.
I see, you're saying you did remove that then? In the,
So let me show you.
Yeah,
Where
those
did my
are-
notes?
I got you. I'm with you now.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Then you'll notice up at the top, we added the amount back from the transfers from the general fund, that 1.1435. That's being transferred from the
okay.
general fund, which matches the general fund's revenue, or I'm sorry, expenditure.
so,
And all this happened just due to us having to put the K-1 center in.
But this has been done after the budget was approved by council, right?
right, because we didn't put it in there before, that amount, I mean,
I think
y'all said to take it out of the rainy day and pay it back, but we don't have to touch the rainy day to do it.
Well, one of the options would be if we've been talking about increasing that rainy day fund for a number of years, and technically it's been the same for 5 or 6 years. It really does. If we're talking about 2 months operating income,
It's actually more than 2 months operating, but with the utilities is the one that I said, we don't have a rainy day for utilities.
So we're talking about creating a separate rainy day fund for utilities.
yeah, we might want to think about that.
Right.
If we have this surplus, then reducing the transfers even further and starting a little
Well,
slush
it's,
fund.
since the utilities is not transferring, they're gonna have more profits.
But do we create a rainy day fund in utilities when we have so many improvements to make? I don't know.
Well, that's what I'm saying, since they're gonna be keeping their profits, and they do have money set aside for infrastructure in each utility, I don't foresee us having to borrow any money for this on the 5-year plan. In addition, we will likely be able to put funds away for rainy day. I mean, it just depends on what we want for 2 months' worth of operating. I don't have it in front of me, but we do have those figures.
I have, on a rainy day, is that similar to what I referred to before? as
The
maintenance of
emergency.
it that we need to do
The 7 million.
over a 20-year period with a new system in?
No, the
So
rainy
it's not to
day
get to
fund
the
that we
same position we're
have.
in today?
It's emergency money.
This is the
Yeah,
$7 million.
we just never touch it.
It would
It's
be
set
It
aside.
would be
Yeah, that's in
comparable to
discussion.
that.
Part of that discussion is going to need to be a fund or something set up for maintenance.
That would be,
systems.
that to me is another fund.
Right,
And we
yeah,
do have
we
those
can talk
funds
about that
also.
when we do all of the talking, but that needs to be brought up
That's
into it.
in the budget. You'll
Right.
see the
Long
revenue
range.
funds, the cash account balances, and it defines what each fund is for, and we do have for capital projects, maintenance, and things
Right.
like that.
Okay.
So that is how that part was edited. And then the utility transfers, and I mentioned this before also, with the projected sales and utilities and what we have in the budget now with 510,000, we brought what we averaged, taking from profits from utilities, was 51%, what we've averaged since 2012. In 2019, we have now budgeted only 5%. So it's significant. And then with, like I said, with the reduced amount for operating, I think determining a percentage of profits that the city can then use for economic development, economic and community development, should probably be decided. It doesn't have to be a lot, like I said, we are going to put most of it away for maintenance and upgrades and rehabilitation.
Not all of this, but I would say some of this is just putting all we talked about on paper and finalizing what all has been discussed, such as if you turn to page 26, you'll see it says council/additional edits. We started with, on the October 8th version, it only showed where y'all were taking the utility rate increases out of 312,000. Well, now you see it's negative 98,063, and that's because we added back the labor cost adjustment, and that was done in gas, electric, and water and sewer. So that's why those numbers, this is just doing what we talked about on paper. So it's basically just adding the labor cost adjustment back in. I don't think we ever had that part printed out or anything. This was just what we all talked about.
So however we want to word the sales tax ordinance, again, half of it was put aside for debt prepayment and capital projects. The amount for capital projects needed is $1,143,500, which, based on projected sales tax income for 2019 of 9.2 million, we only need about 12%. But if you want to just word it as that year's budget for capital projects, that's all we're going to need for now. And as we become more self-efficient and in the black, which we're still not quite, we need 510,000 like from utilities, but when we get in the black, that's when you can look at the sales ordinance again, sales tax ordinance, and if you want to put it aside for other things.
Well, so let me ask you this, Mayor and Jill. If we were to alter the ordinance, it sounds like we would need to say, once we reach that, let me go back to page 2. Once we reach, I believe, the 1.661, then we could divert the funds to capital projects.
Well, we already have that.
Yeah, I think it's the 1.143, right?
Yeah, it's 1.143 is all we need for capital projects. We already have the money we need to pay off city debt in full
Debt.
June 1st. You don't have to take anything from sales tax because it's been
How
taken the
will we
previous
have that
years.
June 1st? Is that not projecting sales tax revenues?
Nope. No, that's already in the fund. In the prepayment.
Well, and because the sales tax ordinance hasn't changed, it's still in effect through, January. So, I mean,
Or until changed.
whenever y'all
Exactly.
change it. So it's just been kind of accumulating. So we've got more than enough to cover that debt service. But I think the only thing that, you would need that 1.143 for the capital projects.
Which is what's budgeted right now in the,
Yeah.
all of the budget.
So I would be okay, and council, jump in here anytime, I would be okay if we stated that once we met that amount required to eliminate the general fund debt, that, and say, for this budget year, I don't want
Right.
to change the ordinance permanently, but, we can look at it again next year, for this budget year, then we can allow the excess to go to capital projects,
Well,
or,
it is, the capital projects is in here for 1.143.
So-
That's what we're proposing the sales tax ordinance say, and that's it.
and then what do you do if we exceed that?
That's what's in the budget. I mean, if you want to exceed that. Sales tax income is an operating, it's a revenue source that goes into the general funds. If it's more than that, then, we're not going to go over budget. We'd have to time
Well,
it
there's
out.
other options. There's the option to eliminate the $510,000 utility transfer.
That's with that, though.
Altogether. If you didn't transfer that and you had
Right.
additional real sales tax revenues,
Right.
you could divert
Absolutely.
that to operating,
Right.
and then you could say you're not relying on any utility
Right.
transfer. So
Right.
that's just an
Exactly.
option.
That's kind of where I was going, instead of transferring that 1.1 for the utility transfer of economic community development, why not just use the sales tax
Well,
revenue?
That's the thing, is you've got, the sales tax is making up all the other operating to get us to $13,000 surplus at the end of the year.
But he's saying instead of getting this money from the utilities,
Right.
we could just increase this amount that's going to capital projects through the sales tax
That's right.
ordinance.
But if you do that, you would be negative down here. Because the operating, if the sales tax is an income that we're including in the budget, it's just going to pay other operating expenses.
You would just list it right here, right, from the sales tax
So
ordinance.
where is
But the full sales tax is on, projected sales tax is on, the page 3.
9.2.
Right, so that income is being used to offset all the city expenses.
Right, but this wouldn't change that, because right now, what is it, half goes to?
Now it's 50% of it, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the
That
city's keeping-
that's including it and all
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
We're-
But I think what Jack's point is, and what Robert is saying is, that 50% is going to the general fund either way. It's
Right.
the other 50 that we're now talking about, 25% of it, instead of going to debt reduction, is now going to something else. So that 25% that we're talking about is more than what we need in that 1.143.
But understand, the way this budget
How do
is
we
right now,
allocate that?
we're not taking half out. This is, what we're proposing with the 1.143 is the amount for capital projects. It's not like that income is going somewhere and else and being stashed away. It's being used to pay governmental expenses.
Right, well, I guess my question would be then, what's the exact figure last year for that 25% that was going to debt reduction?
It was,
You can figure that's a
About
fourth
2
of
million.
9 million, so it's about 2 to 2.5 million,
All right,
2.3
so
million.
then if we're canceling debt reduction, we're playing with 2 to 2.5 million.
You're not,
somewhere
because
in the
we've
budget.
already put it in here. It's already in here paying other operating expenses.
You're talking about more in future,
Yeah, you could do it
in future
but this
cycles,
budget's
what do you
already
do
done.
if you no longer have the debt?
Right.
the debt
I mean,
reduction to
and I
make.
think- And I thought that's what we were talking about in this. too,
Right, but
is
that 2 million, all we've done is we've been able to take less from utilities. It's not like I have that 2 million and it's just extra that we're putting into
Right,
a
no,
fund.
And I think we're all.
Right, so it'll be for future.
I think we're all kind of talking about the same thing, we're just kind of missing each other.
Yeah, I think so too.
That's where, but that's where it
Making it more
becomes
difficult
misleading
than it
to
is,
say
okay.
we're operating so much more efficiently. No, we're just using the excess sales tax revenue to subsidize general government.
No, well, no, because.
you just said that.
We're not, we've, the only thing we have taken from sales tax that is stopped is there's no more debt to pay off.
Right.
Okay.
So I think that if you want to change this ordinance, I mean, right now, as written, it has to go into debt prepayment. But if we have no more debt to pay down, and there's.
And I would just
you
say
could argue-
equals that year's capital projects.
Well, I think you
budget.
just can get to whatever that exact number is, and you say
Right.
we'll be there on June 1st, and then anything additional that was, that 25% is, you can say going to the general operating account, or you could say, well, you could say that, but you may be able to reduce these transfers.
Not this, based on this, we can't do anything else.
Well, if we get there in June, then what happens
We're already
between
there.
July, August,
We
September?
can pay it off today.
Okay.
We're not funding any more money from, well, we are until you change it, but this amount, this 1 point, this is what I want to make.
Actually, you said it'd be 2.19 on June 1st, and that would pay it all off. So we still have to get to 2.19 in the debt prepayment account to have enough to pay off
Well,
all
I
the.
think the 2.1 is the balance in the account. I think the amount we're looking for is like 2.16 or 7. I can't remember
Okay.
exactly
So
what
if you
number
put
it
more,
is.
you're going to have excess funds.
Okay, so you're saying that, maybe what you're saying is that you can't pay it off until June 1st.
Right.
Because of the maturity,
Exactly.
but the money's already
Right.
there.
Yes.
Okay.
And because you have to take into account the other payments that are already scheduled as normal course of business, right?
That's already including
And
the
that's the
regular payment. That's
1.661.
another.
Right,
Right.
That's not from that.
Scheduled, that's
Correct.
scheduled debt.
Right, and so you have to let those flow
We're
through
just
the
gonna make
normal
those,
course that they
right.
would before that 2.19 equals the payoff balances on
Correct.
those loans. I know Jill and Jennifer and I looked at the sales tax ordinance one afternoon, and it is kind of convoluted. I mean, I know at the end of the day, it's fairly straightforward, but then you're bouncing around from one old ordinance to another, and just trying to figure out exactly what was being required. It wouldn't be a terrible idea to amend it and just kind of clean it up. Or, I mean, I think y'all even suggested scratch several of them and then come out with a
Well, I mean, they
fresh
just
one.
need to be
I disagree,
reassessed
Jimmy. I
every
think it's
year.
simple.
Well, maybe it was not simple to just locate it on the website and figure out exactly what it meant, because you had to bounce from one ordinance to another. And I agree with the general concept of 50% to general, 50% to be split, 25 to
That's it.
other.
That's it.
That's
That's
pretty
it.
simple, but finding that on an ordinance was not that simple.
Unless you just knew that that was what we were doing.
It's right,
Right.
There's been
it's there.
several
and-
different amendments to it.
Well, we've done some one-time, on some certain years, we've done some
Right.
one-time amendments.
And I think that's where maybe
Yeah.
the confusion.
But you go
came.
back to the basic 15-20 each year as a basis. So, and if we are, I know one year we said that we were going to let the 25%, the half that was going to go into the debt prepayment, let it go into the operating account. But then we reduced by just say $2 million to make the math simple. We reduced our utility transfers by $2 million so that we could pay off $2 million worth of debt in the utilities. And so that's why if
Which
you
really
And where do we
doesn't make
stand
you
over
reduce
all
the
the
reliance
utilities
on
then?
that, then you can start attacking your utilities debt.
Right.
If it makes financial sense to do that.
I
Right.
think that, I mean, utilities can pay for its own debt, out of its profits, but as soon as you start commingling that again, you really just want them to stand on their own. The city is always gonna need to reinvest in other things that we have been putting off.
Well, I didn't think it was commingling if you let the money stay in the utilities to pay off the utility debt.
Well, no, we were talking about sales tax ordinance. You said, and there was a year where the sales tax ordinance, we put money aside and it paid off utility debt. That
That's
does
not
not make
true. We
sense.
just reduced utility transfers by that amount. Because that was when utility transfers were $2 or $3 million. So we just said, all right, we reduced the transfers by $2 million, let the 25% go into the general fund. So there was never any commingling of funds.
I mean, that was just what I was told, that last term there was a year where we paid utility debt. And there is
Well, we paid utility
debt.
debt out of utility funds, though. We just didn't transfer that money to the general operating account so that we could do that.
Right. Well,
Well, I think, and Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way that this is written, I think that you're saying we should keep the 25% to capital projects
No, it's
up
only
until
12%.
1.143.
It's
Or
about 12%.
however much it is, and then the amount for the debt reduction would just automatically go into the general operating. That's the way this is written.
Well, we got a couple of, 2 or 3 options here. If we want to change it, as long as the sales tax remains 2%, we can say 75% of it goes to the general operating account and 25% to capital projects, if we don't have any general fund debt, right? That's the simple method. Or we could say 50% to the operating account and 50% to the capital projects funds, or whatever. But that's the simple.
If you do that this
Simple
year, though,
method.
you'd have to have utility transfers.
No, I think that would be going forward.
Right.
This year, we just need to put numbers on it, but
The
we're
things I
already
would
there.
like to see, the city pay for and invest in are things that we don't have the money for right now. And that's, investing in economic development. And we're just not spending any money doing that. And that's and how we can create more money. So,
I think we
Yeah,
can
I'd be
talk
more
about that for that's enough for
I'd
another
be more
work
comfortable
session.
with that 12% going to all capital projects instead of general fund. I mean, you put,
the 12% is going to capital
but I'm saying
projects.
that both halves of the half. instead of just half going to the general fund and half going to capital projects, I'd rather both halves of that half go to the capital projects instead of
We
diverting.
don't do $9 million
continually
worth
to-
of capital projects a year. I mean, we're only taking.
Well, half is going to the operating account, right?
No,
and
this,
then one
this
half to the-
proposed budget has 88% going, because we are not taking utility transfers. That's why we only have $510,000 in transfers as opposed to 5.7 million, which would have been transfers and what utilities paid for operating.
But on a normal day, at 9 million, you'd have 4.5 going to the general fund, 2.25 going to capital projects, 2.25 going to debt reduction.
Additional debt reduction.
And the
Correct.
capital projects would be the overflow from the rainy day fund, right? Or is the debt reduction the overflow from the rainy day fund? Doesn't matter, I guess, but that's how it would be
Correct.
split.
Totally separate.
Well, the rainy day fund, once you reach it.
Then you split it this way.
Then you split
Gotcha.
the half, the 1%.
The last
See,
time
there
I
you
looked,
got it. What's
there
so
was
hard about that?
Already
It's
five.
easy.
It's easy.
It's easy, it's just trying to go find that
Just
on
quoted
paper.
It's taking a little time to think about it.
It takes 7 times to go to sales training, right?
So Robert, what you're saying is you'd rather see it go, you'd rather see commit more annually to capital projects than just increase the general fund.
That's right.
But this year,
And
you would
we
be
could
funding
definitely
$1
do more
million
capital
of
projects.
capital projects that aren't on the schedule anymore.
Right.
I think you could amend the ordinance to say 25% towards capital projects up to the amount budgeted, and then, anything above that, anything above, if the budget is, in this case, 1.1, then anything above that just automatically would roll back into the general fund, or you could just look at it every year.
Or you
and
just reduce sales tax to 1.5%.
Well, then you're
I
not
actually
going to be
suggested
investing in
that.
the things that,
Suggest
Well, I
that.
guess
and that's a
We should
sales
at
tax,
some
most
point.
of it comes from outside the city. So then you're going to be making people inside the city limits.
The one thing I don't want to do is bloat our general government so that we're just spending that
We're not
on.
bloating it.
I guess that, I mean,
We're just making it self-sufficient for now.
Yeah, I guess that's always the concern is if you put more money in there, then we're just gonna spend.
There's no doubt
You know,
about
but
that.
If you put it in something that, in some sort of maintenance
Special
or
account,
capital
right.
project, even if you have more in there than you need currently, it's there when you do need it.
Earmarked for the next year.
Yeah. Well, if you go back to the history of the sales tax, it was initially instituted to create a rainy day fund and pay off the debt. And if the debt's paid off, then people say, well, what happened when it's paid off? And we just spend more money.
Well, at that time, though, you're not taking into consideration that, I mean, before 2012, we were taking even more than half of the utility profits. So, I mean, at one point, it was 75%. So it was all reported differently. Sales tax now is, we're just getting it to a point where utilities has their expenses and we have ours, and that's how you can figure out what you can invest in. And right now, we haven't really been investing in anything except as an as-need basis on,
All
per
right,
year.
well, I think that we can work with you, Mayor, and come up with some language here pretty soon to establish what to do with that once that's, since the debt's going to be paid off. I think that's the point, right?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing is, it's, depending on how y'all write it, is it gonna change what's written here?
If we don't do it soon, because right now, that is being taken out. Right?
Say that again, I'm
I
sorry.
mean, until it's amended, yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, that's
right,
being
right,
taken
exactly.
out, and
It's
put
being
into those
done.
funds. So,
Yeah,
Okay.
We can come up with something in the next 2 weeks that'll at least took the brakes on that, and then we can, talk about the long-term change of that ordinance. But, if we can do it, I think we can do it in the next meeting. And put, if we truly have the money to pay off the general fund debt, we can change course on this budget year. Do y'all agree?
Right.
I've
I'm
just
convinced
been
we can do that.
asked for the budget several times. I'm anxious to
Yeah.
get it on the website.
And then, look, Mayor, if there's some additional monies in that debt prepayment account, all we have to do is
I mean,
pass a
yeah.
resolution on what to do
I
with the
totally
excess,
understand.
so that's
But-
not
but
not a problem.
again, you know, as it sits on this paper, by the end of the year is what we have for transfers out of
Yeah,
utilities.
I'd say
So-
reduce the transfer.
Well, we
If we had
can't,
no-
that's what y'all have to do. We can't reduce it until you change that.
All right.
Okay, so the next item on, I'm kind of going out of order, but it's all for budget. I know that one position.
So the K-1 purchase, basically, you've covered that as well, is that right?
Mhm.
Okay.
And we might not need it.
So we're, yeah.
Okay, so the other.
Did you have something to say?
agenda
No, that was, that was my point, is we, you know, we've got it budgeted, which is good, because if we do have to pay for what we can, but we're still hoping that.
I
It
think
won't-
we're broke and we need the grant.
But what we don't need, I mean, it won't affect this, in other words. It's coming from utilities. Okay, then we have IT tech backfill. Basically, in the, budget for the promotion for Sean, we didn't backfill his position. So that's in this budget now, but it wasn't in the original one passed, so it's just a small
So when you say
item.
in this budget now, this is just a proposed budget?
This is, it's in there now, but we'll, just for whatever reason, it was a promotion and I guess didn't include filling that position. So we have to backfill the IT tech.
So we have to add a position to the IT department?
Well, that's just the old position. The promotion should have been the new position. That's just something that,
We already created.
And we already created like 3 positions
We-
in IT, right? In the
no,
budget?
Can you point us to that page, by chance, Jill?
Well, we had, I think I put the personnel back here. Okay, on page 48. Yeah, these are the ones that y'all approved. I took anything you didn't approve off this list.
We approved an IT systems administrator and IT communications specialist.
So the system administrator was the promotion.
that was the promotion. So we have we added, all we did was add, we promoted Sean and we're backfilling his positions. We're not creating a position there.
Position's
The
there, but the
communication,
money
it's only
for it
one,
is not.
one thing that we have. One new position we created was for the communication. I mean, they're the one that's going to do all the software. We promoted Sean. The new position is the IT
Systems administrator.
systems administrator.
You know, I mean,
No, that's
I'm
the
still back to
communication.
another body. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't know that it was understood that we were going to have to
All I
fund
said was
another
that
body. It
Sean-
was just that we were going to have to give a raise, give a promotion.
I'm
to
saying
somebody.
that that's, out of everything on this agenda, that's the only thing that we edited was that, and found out later that that backfilled position wasn't included in the budget.
It was
So
an
we
oversight.
included it. It was an oversight.
The communication specialist, was that the person described as like setting up for the meetings and?
That's correct, yeah. That position's currently being advertised, starting interviews Wednesday for that one.
It was the network administrator y'all cut. And it's not on here because I didn't include the cuts.
So as it was passed, there was one new position added to that, to your department, correct? And there should have
Well, the
been-
promotion should have just been that this is a promotion and his old job remained open to fill. That's the only thing that didn't happen, is the backfilled position wasn't included in his department.
Well, I mean, and I'm listening to your argument, but not every time you promote somebody, that
Oh, I know.
doesn't mean that you have to create a position. If you take
The
a,
position was already there. We have 2 IT tech positions. Sean was promoted, so I went back to Leslie and said, okay, we need to fill that second IT tech back up with, we need to advertise it. Then Jill told me it wasn't budgeted, so
Like I said, it was
I
just
need
an
to-
oversight.
Position
Yeah.
exists, we just
Right.
didn't budget
But
for refilling.
some of the promotions-
exactly.
but if it was presented to us as just a promotion, and that there wasn't going to be a new position. That's all I just want to consider.
I know, that, we did an oversight, we made a mistake.
Just
And
miscommunication.
that happens, I understand
Yeah.
that too. That's not a big deal. But
I've got, yeah, so my IT techs, I need two, because they handle IT on call for police department and utilities after hours, so they rotate between, Sean and Laura rotating. Now it's just Laura there left to take on call.
So how many people do you have in your department?
I have 3 total right now.
Counting you?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So I was hoping to get that IT tech position filled back, so that'd be 4. Then I've got the IT communications, that'd be 5 total, and that, hopefully I'll get that network admin position next year.
Right,
approved.
the recommended audit said we need 6 in IT to support the number of full-time employees that we have. I mean, that was one simple department that was looked at based on us being able to serve in an efficient way or being completely reactionary.
That doesn't sound unreasonable.
Yeah, we have.
That's kind of what I wanted to know. I'm just looking at the scale of the size of our city. So if you're
We
at
just
5,
didn't do it all at once.
if you're at 5 bodies, whatever position, I'm assuming you're going to put people where they need to know. You're going to put people where they need to. I mean, where they need to be is 5 for a city for our total employment force. And I know that not everybody has IT issues, but
And not
still,
every
in
city
all,
owns all their
it's,
utilities also. So
I'm
we're
just kinda looking at the
still
number of people you
working.
service and the number of computers. That doesn't sound unreasonable.
Right.
Council, I don't think that sounds unreasonable. So, any other comments? I'm just looking at comparative, just based on my life experience in a company, in this case, the city of this size, and what's required of IT. That doesn't sound like you've got a whole bunch of people sitting around
I know.
not working.
No.
So what do we
Does
need to
not.
do? Council, I mean, have you got this reflected in
It's
these
in this
budget
budget.
numbers?
No, I did not touch
Oh, I
that.
thought you said that you added it.
No, I didn't even know that was.
So for these budget edits, when we add, when we
I don't
add
think we have to add-
$50,000 to our expenses, it's got to come
We
out of
don't
the.
edit the budget for, unbudgeted items that y'all pass, we don't edit the whole budget every time, so. I thought that was.
I understand, yeah, and I don't disagree with that either. So I just
I mean,
want to hear
I
from the
can-
council if you're willing to
I would,
add this position.
I think just add the position.
Again, we're not adding it, we're just funding it.
Funding it,
We're funding
right.
the old
The position
position.
exists.
Position's there, you're just
Correct.
funding it, we're not adding any more positions.
That's correct.
What was already here.
Well,
we
okay,
unfortunately-
you're adding funding for the
Right.
position, that's semantics, yeah.
It's a grade 22 position.
I mean, whenever I rework it for whatever y'all decide on sales tax, I can certainly add it then.
Okay, let's work on that.
And just the
If council's willing.
I don't think I brought it up much, but since it did come back up, this communication specialist, and I don't want to get hung up on it, Jeff, but he's setting up for meetings. That's his primary job description.
Well, he's gonna be
That's
doing a lot more.
That's job 1. His schedule is going to be, his work schedule is going to be scheduled around all the meetings. So, so he would be here today. He would have come in probably at noon and, set up, got ready for it, and started recording. When he's not doing meetings, doing other things, the second task I want him to handle is website edits. That takes a lot of our time, doing website edits, taking care of the telephone system, taking care of rewiring closets. We have just a lot of bad wiring going bad, fiber optics going bad. Case in example, Rec Center a couple weeks ago, the fiber optics went bad. If I could just have somebody constantly maintaining that, I think it would go a long way to helping us out. So they're going to be doing a lot more than just meetings, but their meetings is their primary function.
Does that job description include all of those tasks?
Yes.
Now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so no action needs to be taken on that job
No,
description?
no.
Council, any other comments on that? Alicia, a note to add that. Okay,
All right, thank you.
thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
And the only other thing we had on this list was, and I'm going to have Richard come up and explain this, just the process for professional service, what Daphne does, and Daphne, I guess, kind of copied what Mobile does. And I think what he's going to propose, it sounds very simple, is going to end up saving us a lot of money. Because, well, he'll explain it about the design fee and whatnot, is having just a pre-negotiated.
One of the things, and as you know, Dee Dee Brandt was promoted to our purchasing manager, and she has been able to bring Jennifer Bush, who was over at the Nick Center as the purchasing clerk, and they're finally up to full speed. Sat down with the mayor and Richard Peterson and kind of talked about how can we make a process that maybe decreases the amount of, a lot of it's a paperwork related thing. So for example, every time we bring to you and get permission to negotiate a price, we initiate a brand new professional service contract with whoever that engineering firm is. And it's a very important document in the sense it talks about the insurance they have to carry and you know, their licensing and everything that they have to do. One of the things that we would like to at least explore with y'all is an ability on, in the initial start, is to go out for a request for qualifications for those firms that want to do work for the city, that they have a period that all those responses come in, and they, in that qualification, state the services they render. If they do mostly utility work, or if they're mostly civil site and drainage, road work, if they're architectural based or whatever, and so they get categorized. These are the kind of jobs that we want to be considered for, and that we bring back to you a recommendation that we enter into a standard agreement with these firms and that agreement has a 36-month lifespan to it, so that we get because understand, a contract that we do with professional services has two things: all the regular boilerplate that we have to do, required for all those things that are just standard to every contract. This contract would have all that in it. The thing that it wouldn't have in it is what the actual scope of work is for the specific project. Because understand, every time we bring in a professional, we're recreating the wheel every time. And Dee Dee and her crew, it's a lot of paperwork they're pushing. And it's necessary, but it can be handled under a standard service agreement. And then what would happen once that step is done, then any new firm who shows up and says, hey, I want to do business with the city, they fill out an RFQ. On a quarterly or as-need basis, you'll see a resolution saying, hey, would you add firm X, Y, and Z to the list, okay? And what would happen there, or what our recommendation, and I've done the kind of a simple flow chart, and again, this is all preliminary. I'll give this to you after So we have a master list, and you've authorized that list, and we've entered into a set professional service agreement at this point in time. So what would happen in a project initiation sequence? First of all, whether it be Tom Cool at Parks and Recreation, or it be Public Works or Public Utilities, some need is determined that has to be supplied by an outside professional services firm. And a general scope of work would be developed for what is required to fill that need. And then that project would need to be discussed with the mayor and to the council, whether that is done as a submission for a work session that say, hey, there's a lift station that needs to be upgraded, and we need to hire that out, so that you have awareness on that. Based upon an equitable rotation, meaning those firms that do that type of utility work for the project, hypothetically discuss, a firm that's already on the list would be selected, and that scope of work would be vetted with that firm. And once that scope of work is agreed to between whoever's producing it in the city, whether it be the utilities director or the electrical superintendent or Mr. Cool or whoever needs that service, then that selected firm that has the qualifications to do it would come back with a probable cost of construction for that particular project. Then that's where the master service agreement comes in. And I don't have one for everybody, but Richard and I have kind of been working on this. What that goes to is that for whatever the project is, there's a standard rate based upon probable cost of construction. So that whether it's company X, Y, or Z, or company ABC, for the same services, they're paid the same rate. That way that the council always knows that, hey, this is how this fee was determined. Then at that point in time is when we have to come to you as a council, that's the center box there, and propose the fee and the probable cost for the project. And of course, that cost has to be approved, whether it's budgeted or not budgeted, because of how we do things. And then, if the council approves and the funds are budgeted, then we don't issue a contract. We just have an approval of the scope of work, which was submitted to you as part of the professional fee calculation, and a notice of authorization signed by the mayor. That initiates the project. Then it's just like it always is at that point in time when y'all have approved engineering services. It goes out for design and survey and engineering, goes to bid, comes back for y'all to accept the bid or reject the bid or some other action, and then the project goes to construction. The biggest thing is I think this accomplishes is two things. One, every time we go and negotiate a fee, we try to get the best value possible for the city. But certain companies are going to give different numbers than other companies, and this is an even playing field. And just so you know, Baldwin County, Mobile County, this was stolen pretty much straight from Mobile County. I think even their numbers, which are pretty favorable to the city. But there also is a clause in here that it can be a lump sum negotiation, because sometimes there's certain projects, it's just better to have a lump sum, and regardless of what's entailed to get the project completed, that's what you're going to be paid. It does two things. One, it does remove one step coming to council, a formal step in the sense is that there is not a resolution authorizing the mayor to negotiate a fee, meaning that the fee is already pre-established in the professional service agreement. There's a way to calculate it, which does add a little bit more streamlining on our side of the house for this. And the other thing that it saves is that we're not doing a brand new contract for every project. And I would have no problem that if there was a limitation on project size, meaning if it's a project larger than this, then it needs to be handled in a different way. But for your turn-of-the-mill small drainage or small utility or whatever, and y'all would have to give input of where that break point is. Maybe like in the bid law that they treat $500,000 and above projects differently than they do below that. That may be where we look at implementing this. But I think that it would make the process a little bit smoother. There's no way, we're not trying to eliminate council's oversight because the law says you have the oversight, meaning that you've got to do the budget appropriation, and when a bid comes in, only a city council can accept that bid and take action on it. But that was one of the things that we've been looking at and kind of discussed this with Jill, and it would clean things up. And it would make the process very uniform across the board. Things that we'd have to make sure that we're responsible for is that, one, that we're sharing the wealth equitably as possible, meaning that if we have firms that are qualified, there's a progressive rotation, and things that you may want to think about. These are always tough ones. In different jurisdictions I've been in, they kind of cap the number of firms that would be on the rotation list to make sure that at least there would be enough work in that cycle, and then the next 3 years it would be, add additionals, take off. Those are things that we definitely look for input from, but I just think that it would help us in our process better on the just setting up and going forward kind of in that. And there's nothing sacred about these numbers. They can be adjusted down or up. But I just think that the one point that does bother me, and I know Mr. Burrell's pointed this out, is that if a big firm thinks that they deserve more money to deliver the same product than a smaller boutique firm, that shouldn't be the city's problem that their overhead is more than the smaller firm if they're delivering the exact same product to the city. And if they're a qualified firm and they can deliver contract documents, design documents, and drawings to go out for bid, why would we pay firm X more than we would pay firm Y? And that's one thing I do like about having a uniform service agreement across the board. And I've found it has served well in the past in other places that I've worked. So that's just one of those areas that we'd like to explore with you. And if there's a comfort level to do that, we'll get more into it. So.
You know, the service agreement sounds like, my first thought is it sounds like it makes the process more efficient and, eliminates like you said, eliminates having to sign a new contract each time. However, if you have a probable cost of construction that you have to receive each time, that's almost the same as going out and asking them to give us a cost of whatever that project is. Are we going to have to spend a lot of time confirming that probable cost of construction, which is, just back to whether you just, believe their number or you don't believe their number. And so you have pre-established rates, but let's say you think something's, going to be, they say it's going to take 12, hours to do a job, and it really only takes 10, unless we're chatting.
It's more of a percentage for design fee and,
There's two mechanisms here that we try to address that, and it is a double-edged sword, okay? If they come up and say the project is going to be $450,000 and we calculate the fees, and let's say the bid opens at $350,000, well, then they're in the debt to the city, meaning that when we calculate the CE&I fees, if the project goes forward, then they already, we have a credit due back to us, so that is backed out that time. On the downside, where we need to be responsible to you, and this is the scary part of this, is that it says, that this agreement, that it says that if the actual comes in, they say it's going to be $450 and it comes out to $475, they're actually going to end up getting more money on the design end because it's a percentage of. And that can be addressed in this agreement that says if you fail to plan accordingly, we shouldn't be punished for it. So we could address that in the agreement, that you put your number out there, and if you are low, then you're punished. If you are high, we are rewarded, okay? And I don't mind that, because that's going to make the design professional be very careful in making sure they study and give that number. Now, I will tell you right now, the biggest communication that's going on in the design world out there is everybody is just freaking out with bid openings these days, because it's just all over the place. It is just, and the private side. We were talking to a developer about a project that we'd already had a pre-construction meeting for, and hey, are you going to start on that? And he says, every quote I've gotten is so high that it doesn't meet my budget right now. So that's a scary part of that, because I know that there is concern is that you want to have as many knowns as possible, but at least when you as a council consider moving forward the project, at least you're going to see an engineer's honest estimate of what they think this project's cost, so that at least you're making a decision to go forward based upon the best information known at that time. It's never going to be that exact number. Hopefully it's a little less or no more than a little more, but it does give you as a council more information about what is thought of as the probable cost of this project.
And because this is in place in other cities, the unknown of this, engineer getting slightly more for a design fee, we don't have that managed right now. I mean, I think that part of it is going to save substantially, because we're already pre-negotiating that on the front end, and it's something they've already agreed to that rate. and it's the same for everybody.
How do you rotate through the professional service providers? Let's say company A knows they're next on the list, and they, hey, you're going to ABC for this, ABC, 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 and A is up next. What's their incentive to give you a fair price? If they're just the next company that gets the job.
It's
Well,
the standard.
Yeah, the thing is that, I hope I have enough experience that if somebody's trying to blow smoke, I'm gonna sit there and call them on once we've agreed to a scope of work and they come back with a number that's unrealistic or inflated or whatever, that's part of what you need to expect of me is that I'm gonna at least try to perfect that number to the best possible where I believe it's within the realm of possibilities there. I think that's the one thing I don't have an answer for you. My first answer is that I think in the request for qualifications that we should give a high preference for those firms that have a foothold, at least in the Eastern Shore, meaning that they're at least operating a main office or an office facility within the Eastern Shore. Or meaning if there's a firm that most of their people are in Montgomery and they may have a small office in Mobile, that they would not rise as high on the qualification grading as a firm that has an office right here in Fairhope or at least in the Eastern Shore within a few minutes drive. Because that is, I think the one thing that when I use a consultant engineer to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, can you meet me out here? We got to look at something, as opposed to where I did have a firm that won out of Montgomery and the guy had to get in his car and drive down. So it was, there was no immediate solution. It was going to be a 3-hour wait before you could have somebody at the earliest on that job to look at it. And we may need to discuss is there a cap that we put on there? And that cap could be for public works, wherever I'm going to ever need design professionals is going to be in either road design or drainage or a combination of both, transportation drainage related and, occasionally maybe some environmental. So there could be a cap in those categories. Richard and Mike would need to come and tell you what, the areas that they would need, and the nice thing in utilities, they use mechanical engineers, they use electrical engineers, they use, a little bit greater variety of engineers at Public Works. And then, then there's the architectural and that kind of thing that does come up on occasion that we need those services. And, so, those are all things that need to be fleshed out, but I think that it could be done in a way that gets you an equitable rotation. And if a firm gets a big job, then they may know it may be a long time before they get back on the rotation because, you've got to, they hit it all hard.
So you can put some randomness.
Oh, absolutely, yes. And, what I did in Daphne is on a regular basis, about at least once a year, we gave a report to council that showed who had been used and what they had earned in that cycle to kind of show that we were trying the best as possible to balance it out. And so sometimes this firm got 3 little jobs where this firm only got 1 big job, but the dollars kind of balanced in that sense, so.
Council, you have any questions? We're running out of time on the work session here.
I like that idea.
I like that idea.
You're not going to get all the answers, you're not
Certain
going to solve all the problems. I mean, use the library, for example. We were told initially, what, 475? And look what it ended up being. So, I mean, you're not going to get every scenario right every time, so.
I guess what I'd like to see is I'd like to see some what you propose as limits on that. And
Okay.
you don't have to provide that tonight, but.
Well, and I'll work with Mike and Richard and Dee Dee and the mayor, and we'll get this a little better fleshed out. I know one of the things that Richard's working on is, we're talking about the scope of services rendered. He's doing an addendum that covers the utility section because there are certain things that utility needs that Public Works never would need. So, but I appreciate you taking the time to listen. We're going to get this fleshed out and try to streamline this. And Dee Dee and Jennifer are working themselves to the bone right now, but they're going to finally get caught up and get up to speed. So, thank you.
Was there anything else, Mayor? Is that it?
That's it.
Okay. All right, committee updates. Councilman Robinson. Councilman Boone.
I don't have any.
Councilman Brown.
Yeah, bike ped committee met. Sherry Lee was there, talked about the GIS for sidewalks around the city, always trying to fill in blank spots where sidewalks don't connect with each other. Talked about placement of additional bike racks that we already have, trying to get those put out. And that was about it for that committee. The EAC met and continued our discussion for the special tax district, so get ready. More to come. That's it.
Councilman Conyers?
Historic Preservation met this past Wednesday. They've got several new members to that committee, and they're working to kind of rejuvenate or refresh ideas on bringing forward some type of proposal for historic preservation for Fairhope. The Environmental Advisory Board met on Friday afternoon. I have not had a chance to review those minutes. I was out of town during that meeting. And then the Library Board is meeting concurrently with our meeting tonight. They had to reschedule due to the holiday, Martin Luther King Day coming up Monday. So I don't have an update from them.
The Airport Authority had a special called work session to work on their notice of intent to lease property on the east side, and they're just trying to work on the contract and taking input as to, what the lease agreements are going to look like, and what's going to constitute a bid if we have to go to a bid. We think that we may have enough pads that it's not really a bid, it's a set price, and we put a minimum value on the building and things like that. But that's still a little bit of a work in process. There was a lot of input. I know that the attorney for the Airport Authority is putting all that together so that we can reconvene and see how close we can get to putting out that letter of intent to lease the properties on the east side that are adjacent to the improvements that have been made over there. That's not all the east side. The Industrial Development Board has a meeting called for later this week to discuss something that came up at the last Planning Commission meeting, and that was there's as a parcel of property that's been asked to be zoned from M1 light industrial to B2, and we only have a very, very small amount of light industrial in the entire city, and I thought it was best that we at least get an opinion from the IDB because there's been some action in that area. This is down there along Nichols Avenue, and just recently the IDB along with the Baldwin County EDA granted a tax abatement on it was actually on the Fairhope Brewery for the equipment that's being purchased for a canning operation there. So there is some light industry that goes on in that area. That industrial park goes, extends from the west side of 98 and goes all the way over to the east side of 98 down Nichols Avenue. And I think that they're just going to make a recommendation, and it may not be that this is a big deal. It's a restaurant that's asked to be rezoned, and it brought up some other issues with some of our zoning. For instance, they were trying to find a fit for this restaurant because they wanted to grow some vegetables for some consumption there, and apparently we only have one zoning designation that allows for agricultural use. And I think the council ought to give it some little thought too. What constitutes agricultural use? I don't think that hydroponic growing of vegetables in a building necessarily is an agricultural operation. So, but we don't want to make a habit of allowing things that aren't allowed. So we could, maybe tweak the zoning regulations and what they're comprised of. But it's just more to put that on the map so that we don't wake up 5, 10, 20 years, 50 years down the road and say that we allowed, and I'm not picking on restaurants, but allowed restaurants to fill up all of our light industrial, because we don't have really any more land that we can zone that right now. All of the outlying areas that are unzoned, it's up to the property owner, and unless they willingly rezone light industrial. We have that's on Nichols, and we have that surrounds the airport property, which, if it's adjacent to the runway, would be aviation related, and kind of envisioning some larger operations there on the west side. So I just want to make y'all aware of it. It may be something that comes back for the council to visit in the near future about maybe tweaking some things and just trying to find out, where these things fit. One outcome could be that you don't think that should be light industrial, that it makes more sense to be B2. That's a possibility, but being that the IDB has been active now for 4 or 5 years, I think it's best to get their feedback as well. I think that's it.
Jack, I had one more thing.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Conyers had mentioned it about possibly trying to consolidate some of these committees that have similar interest. The Bike and Ped Committee is, I think, short maybe 2 or 3 members, and talked about trying to recruit, advertise to get some members, having a little bit of difficulty there. What is the process, Lisa, who has the answers of trying to consolidate, not trying to do away with any committee? But if there's 4 or 5 that continually show up and they can't get anybody else, maybe we need to put those 4 or 5 with 3 or 4 from another committee that have similar interests.
By and large, that it's up to the council, although there are, certain, like especially authorities that are created by state statute that you couldn't consolidate. And I'm not saying that you're suggesting any of those, so I would say if you have those ideas, just bring it to Lisa. Lisa can disseminate that, and we can do that pretty easily. The problem is if you consolidate, are you going to adopt the bylaws from one committee or the other? Or are you going to consolidate them? Because you have to create.
You kind of have to revamp them a little bit.
And sometimes you just do it and you put it on the committee to come back and present some bylaws to the council to adopt too. But I would check with Lisa, because there are certain laws in place that do put limits on certain committees. But I think the ones that you're talking about probably don't have those restrictions. Anything else? Department heads, I know, did some of you have some things to bring forth before us real quick? Well, we got a pretty long agenda. We may have to touch on some of these before the meeting.
Hey. So I'm just going to go with this first one first. Let me pass this around. I talked to a few of you about this, but we have a, here, can you take one and pass it? Mayor. This one for you. Jay. I didn't forget you, Lisa. And then the same here. This is separate. Locations. So we have a feature film, and I've talked to a couple of you, like I said, about this coming to Fairhope, and they followed. Chief and I have both signed off on it, and we've met with the production team. I've met with them several times, and Sherry Schwartz has met with them with me. And the reason I'm here is just because the shooting schedule. I know we like to have the exact dates and locations pinned down, but as I understand, because the whole film is being shot here, some of it we have to be a little flexible with, and I've talked to Chief about this too. We're not going to be able to say exactly which day they're going to be at which location or which time of the day. They'll still comply with the ordinance, obviously, for low impact versus high impact film. If there's anything, to do with notifications, they've been doing that. They've been canvassing already. They've really been working hard. And I actually have, somebody's here from the a lot of people are here from the production, but the person in charge of it is here to answer questions if y'all have any. I don't even know if you will, but where are you? You want to come up for a second?
You people have had to sit through this boring work
They
session.
did. I was asking them if they were
God
learning.
bless you.
They're learning all about Alabama, bid law process.
We haven't even had any fireworks in this. It's been pretty boring.
And they have been great to work with. I'm just going to say incredibly professional. Here. How are you doing? Oh, come right up here. Yes.
Here, Ted.
Get to sit at the table. Yeah, whoever y'all want to. If y'all have any questions for them, and again, we haven't done a film, to this degree that I'm aware of, that's on locations throughout the city for the entire process.
You know what I would say, and you know, and I know in this business, you have to remain flexible, and you don't know, you plan something for one day and it gets put off till the next morning, or 2 days, or a week, and I get that, and I'm okay with that. I just want to know that when we allow this low impact, that you will just, you know, respect our businesses. I always say that the citizens are excited to see these things, and they like it going on in the town. It's kind of cool. It's the businesses that we get the complaints from, because it interrupts their operations, and if you can just, you know, if you've paid all the fees, then you've paid all the fees, and just you go, and for you too, Shirley,
Sure.
this is my opinion, is just to give them as much notice as possible whenever, and I think you'll find that if you go talk to those people, they're going to be reasonable. Sometimes they just don't want to be caught off guard, even if it's to say, we think it's going to be today, but it may be tomorrow, and it might be the next day. Well, that's not a concrete day and time, but you give them a warning. I think that's all they want.
And
You're a business owner, Mayor. Is that what you want?
I mean, yes,
Oh, I know you want them to shoot in your store, but I mean, other than
I
that.
just welcome the industry in general.
Not that that's a pitch
we
or
visited the
anything.
store already.
Yes.
We've gone by, and we've worked in a number of towns where we've done the size of production, and we understand, you know, the necessity of leaving as little of a footprint as possible and remaining respectful of the community, and we want this to be a collaboration with the city and the production as well. We don't want it to feel like we come in and say, stay out of our way. I work for a company called Scott Free, which is was started by Ridley Scott, who's a director. I'm sure you've seen some of his films, and he has a reputation worldwide for being one of the most renowned filmmakers in the business, and also for the standards of production that he's upheld. And you know, we look at it as a representation of him as well, being out here. So, you know, we want to be as respectful and as quiet as possible to whatever extent.
Well, I'm impressed, Sharon. I don't know that we've ever had people involved in the filmmaking to even come to our work session,
That's
to even
right.
say that.
Yeah,
Oh,
That's a
Thank
huge
It says a
start,
lot.
right? It's a great start right there.
Definitely.
If that's any indication, so.
They've been great to work with.
And if I could just follow up on that, you know, we've brought in a location team that's worked with us many times before, and they're very much of that same philosophy, which is to say that, you know, when we use location, we leave it better than we found it. When we work, particularly in places like downtown, where, for instance, even just parking trucks might have an impact on businesses, we talk to all of those businesses well in advance and make sure, as you say, that they know what we're doing, when we're doing it, and what the impact is going to be, and work out whatever negotiations we need in advance of that. We don't today, because we just started scouting last week, you know, have all of our locations lined up, but as we begin slotting them in, and as we begin putting that schedule together, we'll make sure that Sherry Lee continually gets updated and sees that growing schedule as we go. So by the time we start shooting, hopefully, everybody will have a pretty good idea of where we're going to be and what we're doing.
But, you know, and also in addition to the businesses, you know, just, I would say, work extremely close with the police department, because they've got to handle, you know, the disturbance to the traffic flow and
That's right.
parking and things like that. But I think the key is just let people know, and they'll probably welcome you with open arms.
Appreciate that.
great. We're excited to be here.
How's it been so far in Fairhope?
It's been fantastic. I mean,
They
you know,
might be
we're-
moving here. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah,
Although,
That's, yeah.
tourism budget check. I mean,
This
so,
is also
yeah.
a story about a local family as
I've
well.
heard
about
about
that.
that.
Yeah,
I've
I'm
heard
sure you
about
know
it.
Matt and Nicole.
So, yeah, I've heard it's a great
Great.
story.
It was
Yeah.
a great essay, or, it's a great
That
story
Matt
that he
wrote.
wrote.
Yeah.
Yeah, heartbreaking.
Yeah, we
I
don't
would
have
only,
the tissues here right now, so.
Oh,
I would
God,
only
she
throw out
is a
there to
tearjerker.
stay in touch with Sherry Lee about the schedule, because you've got 3 Mardi Gras parades, Arts
Yes,
and
they
Crafts
have.
Festival,
I
and the
think they're
dog parade.
incorporating now.
Yeah.
All in that time frame for filming, so it'll be exciting.
That'll be great.
Jay, did you have anything? You're kind of our unofficial.
Are you our film?
Well, you are, yeah. I mean, I was going to call you Hollywood, but I didn't want to. Well,
Is
you
Jay
know,
our resident film?
Our downtown merchant.
Are they filming at the Christmas parade?
quasi-liaison. And you're also the council president pro tem, too.
No, I mean, I think as long as
As long as you are the cheerleading boys will be fine. Great.
Yes.
If you don't, you're
Yes,
fired.
that's Ted.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's Ted. This is Ryan.
Right.
Yes, sorry. Here.
Thank you.
And we're available
I
to
forget
answer
you're
questions anytime.
Anytime.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're an open book.
And I'll keep you posted, but they've done such a great job. I know they'll do a great job here and people will enjoy it. So thank y'all for
Great,
coming.
thank you guys, thank you for having us.
Appreciate it.
Very nice to
Stick
meet you
around. We
all.
only have 27 items.
They're great.
Probably won't take more than 3 hours.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Any other department heads? You got something, Mr. Peters?
I'm letting the movie people out. If anybody has any questions, I'll answer them.
Okay. Chief, you have anything? Council, let's take a really quick look at this agenda. The first 9. Wayne, you'll handle
Yes, sir.
all of the first, 5 through 9?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Eric, you'll handle 10?
Yes, sir.
And, let's see, 11. Eric, will you handle 12?
Yes, sir.
I can handle 13, along with Lynn. Will this be, Wayne, will this be you, number 14 on the Kirkman Lane?
Richard Johnson.
Oh, Richard, okay. Who's going to discuss, not a 16, the point-to-point connection?
Jeff Montgomery.
Jeff will. I'm afraid, council, we're going to have some explanations on some of these. I apologize for not getting them on the agenda meeting. Just a lot going on. Okay, I think 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 are all budget items. 22. Is that 22 budgeted? Did we put that in there, that E1 fire truck? Where is that? Chief, is that, what is the rebuild and refurbish the first responder E1 rescue truck? We want to knock this out.
Yes, sir. You want to talk about it now?
Sure, yeah, just for 2 minutes.
John's going to talk about it, but it's a rescue truck, it's $915, the refurb. It was budgeted.
It was budgeted. Which one is
All the
that?
rest of these were.
That's our rescue truck we have out at Station 2 that carries the Jaws of Life and carries different equipment. It's also a service truck. That truck was purchased in 1993. Since then, it's outside NPA standards for safety. The cab's going to be enlarged. Basically, all that's going to be left is that's not new is the box itself.
I was going to say, how much does it cost for a new one?
Sir?
How much is a new one?
I think we're looking at, what was it, 450?
350.
350 to 450 for a brand new one.
Okay, so you're basically going to have a new one except for the box for 183.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And we had $150,000 budgeted, and what ended up happening was we got a number when we started the project. Tim Bung worked really hard on this project. He worked actually last budget year he worked on it into this year. And since he started the project, things have went up, and so we're going to be about, I guess, about 30,000 over budget. But this year, I'm about done with our inspections on all the trucks. We don't have nowhere near the problems we had last year, so we're going to have a bunch of money left over, probably in the repair and maintenance budget.
Well, you need to go to the Richard Johnson School of Budgeting, where everything comes in under budget, $5,000.
Yes, sir.
And what I recommended, and to see if this is something that y'all are interested in, is just having just a subheading on the agenda that shows these items are in the budget the past. And if something over, then it can be written in the notes. I just think it's a level of transparency. It makes it easy for you.
So
but it
you
also
wanted that
makes-
actually, I was going to get with you on that,
Yeah.
but so we can do.
And it's for the
You want
citizens,
that
too.
on, just on the resolution then, that it's.
Well,
budgeted.
or you could just say, the rest of this agenda, these are approved in, or passed in the 2019 budget, then you can see that, but citizens can see it too, because a lot of times they see this and it's like, what, we're spending so much money, but
we spend
I
a
think
lot of
it's
money.
important to say that this was planned, and this is in the budget, and this is what we're ready
You
to.
have to work hard to spend $65 million.
Right. But I think it's important.
Correctly.
And I think citizens would appreciate it too.
SCADA systems. Who's going to talk about SCADA if we have questions? That's you, Mr. Peterson? SCADA, who would talk about our SCADA?
This is a Jeff item.
I can talk about
It's
it.
Jeff Montgomery. It's Verizon.
Oh, that's the plan, okay. That's Jeff. All right. Our plan, I can cover that and cover that. Okay, I can cover, now council will have two items
Is that
that
number
we,
25, should that be New Year's Eve? 20?
no, I think that 25 is for the 2018 New Year's Eve to go back and pay for those.
Didn't get put on the
It didn't get put on there prior. But those are, paid for through the rentals. That's not, we're not out $10,535. Those are rented at $500 a pop. Okay, I would like to add two items. City attorney has requested that we add an executive session to talk about ongoing litigation. And, can we close the door, please? Thank you, James. And then also, at the request of Councilman Brown and also myself, have you handed this out, clerk? We would like to, the council to consider a resolution to authorize Public Works to get quotes for new windows on the backside of the Quail Creek Clubhouse. And you might be aware that all the windows are being replaced, and the only place that they're not is in the rear, which is where a lot of the renovations have taken place. And so Robert brought this to my attention. I thought it was a good idea. I talked to Lynn about it, and we feel like for about $20,000 we can bring the windows in the backside of the clubhouse to be to match everything else in the clubhouse. That's it. So we'll ask y'all. Robert, you say for materials and labor we're estimating $20,000.
I would say probably 30.
You'd estimate 30.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anyway, so I'll ask y'all for that at the beginning, and we'll adjourn. We need to be back here in just a few minutes, so if we can.